So the entities, interdimensionality. So since David Grush from the Department of Defense, the highest ranking whistleblower to go public, shared that the US government had a UAP, UFO reverse engineering program, the result was the creation of a House Oversight Committee on Grush's claims. On January 12th, 2024, Congress members left the House Oversight Committee on UAP after a classified briefing to speak with the media. This is Representative Anna Paulina Luna.
I mean, do you hear the same thing, Mr. Krishnamurthy?
So this is what I'll say. I'm going to reiterate, we can't talk about specifics and what we got into, but what I can tell you is what Grush shared with me in an unclassified setting that I firmly believe in. I believe that he's telling the truth. I think that he is a credible witness, and what I can also say is one thing in particular that really caused me to be concerned about this whole thing is that Grush had stated to myself, Representative Burchett, and another member on the phone that there were people that were hurt hiding this information and keeping this information safe and or trying to come forward with this information. What I can tell you is I believe that claim after now leaving.
How much?
And that's all I'll say now.
Do you think that the administration is sending the right people? Do you think that you guys are actually talking to the right people in these classified?
I think that they are sending the correct people on paper. However, there is, and it's become evident that there is an overclassification and that we are continually being stonewalled. My one concern is that we are authorizing money that is supposed to be spent on certain programs, and yet there is compartmentalization in which Congress doesn't have access to oversight in those programs, and that's a problem. I think it's incredibly important to listen to the specific words that Grush uses. You know, Grush never said extraterrestrial or alien, he said interdimensional. I think that that's incredibly important because those are the types of things that when we go in there, there's just certain things that I think that it's important that you guys listen to on that.
On government funding, quickly, I know you voted yesterday. You still voted against.
This is UAP today, so thank you guys.
Can I get clarification?
Yes, one more.
You said interdimensional. I mean, now, what does that term? Is this something that bends time and space? What are you getting at?
I think that Grush, when I had talked to him on whether these were specifically extraterrestrials or alien in origin, he said interdimensional. He refused to use certain terms, and I think that's incredibly important because I think that that's really the question we're all wanting to know, right? And so I'm actually going to have a sit-down conversation with him and ask him to come back and talk to us directly because it seems that we are getting more information from the source than going into a skiff and then not being able to tell you guys what we're talking about.
Is this stuff that we just as humans might not be able to understand if it's interdimensional?
I think that we can understand it. I think that it's just, it's an approach, right? I mean, like, remember, we just now for the first time in history really had Congress have whistleblowers come forward credible that we're telling the entire world that there is something other than human life forms. Grush said that those were interdimensional beings. He refused to use extraterrestrial and alien. I think that's important to note, but I do have to go feed my baby, so thank you guys.
Thank you.
So the interdimensional aspect of the aliens has long been hypothesized by Jacques Vallée, the computer scientist and longtime respected author and ufologist, that aliens were originating from another dimension, as per this title. Ex-Pentagon official, which is David Grush, and Jacques Vallée suggest higher dimensional beings crossing into our world. US military recovered UFO that distorted space-time and craft able to alter our reality, as mentioned in bizarre Navy docs. David Grush himself suggested in Congress the context of extra dimensions and the holographic principle of string theory. I was in the White Room witnessing the afterlife and the afterlife vision, where I had an understanding of the dimensional nature of the universe. So this comes directly from my book. And when I was in this, I was in the afterlife vision, this thing that I was experiencing in the White Room. And what I discovered or what I experienced, most of all, if humans looked at this location, they would see empty space, a place in the universe void of galaxies or stars. But there was a dimensional place there. From this, I saw clearly that the universe is made up of layers of lands, and that this is what the universe really is, layers of dimensional spaces placed on top of one another. What I witnessed in this brief share of experience showed me that dimensions, which are invisible to human eyes, could still have physical-like structures such as buildings or environments. Yet the beings who occupy that space are dimensional by nature, having other portions of their awareness spread throughout the universe. I want to emphasize these words, layers of lands. So the word dimensional might conjure up ideas like alternate realities, where there's another you, but just in another timeline, making a different career choice. Or possibly, our imagination goes into the idea of the fabrics of energy. So just expanding outwards in some kind of abstract ideas of energy. But this idea of layers of lands suggests environments with their own biome. Maybe light, gravity, space, or time act differently there, still creating formations of landscapes where intelligence, maybe even greater than our own, grows, develops, or evolves. This could be nature just expanding out into dimensions. And in my 8th contact event, I was phased at one point, having gone to Venus, phased in a dimensional way so I could be in the environment and not interact with it. So on May 5th, 2020, the Northrop Grumman Corporation released a small advertisement showing an invisible gray alien walking amongst humans on their Facebook page. Invisible aliens among us. So alongside of the advertisement was an article. Now, Northrop Grumman is a global aerospace defense and security company. The majority of their business is with the US government, principally the Department of Defense and Intelligence Community. So this was the article, and they did a research article on it. Hiding in plain sight, the argument for invisible aliens. And part of the research, but what if the truth lies closer to home? What if invisible aliens exist among us, already here, but unseen by human eyes? Astrobiologist Samantha Rolfe of the University of Hertfordshire took this idea and ran with it, exploring the possibility of a shadow biosphere capable of supporting alien life on Earth, just not life as we know it. So in this article, they call it a shadow biosphere, again, which is indicative of layers of lands, this idea that there's environments, dimensions that exist with their own physics or laws of nature. So when they say dimensional, it's definitely something you are connected to, because I have been very public that I continue to experience the Elder, the main gray alien that I deal with, in paranormal form, as per this video on my YouTube channel. They are very much in the paranormal realm, which would definitely be dimensional, at least in part, and it could be something that expands further out in ways humans can't understand. And this is corroborated by Leslie Kean, the journalist who broke the New York Times story that started this all back in 2017 with the Pentagon 3 UAP videos. She keeps investigating the phenomenon as per the Star article. UFO investigator who found US alien ship Whistleblower says ghost dimension exists. Leading author Leslie Kean claims there is a paranormal side of UFO reports connected to ghosts and the supernatural. Now, another dimensional aspect of the entities that I experienced that is also something that we are all connected to is the afterlife. On July 5th, 2020, right here on Vancouver UFO, I did this presentation in which I talked about how I witnessed the afterlife on a gray alien spacecraft. I spoke about this with no cooperation at the time, just putting myself out there. And now the cooperation that this is even possible is beginning to emerge. So one of the most interesting players in all of this phenomenon right now in the disclosure process is Bob Bigelow. This guy sits in the background, just in the shadows. Here's a video summarizing him.
The December 16th, 2017 New York Times article. It says, and I quote, "Contracts obtained by the Times show a congressional appropriation of just under $22 million beginning in late 2008 through 2011. Now, for those who don't know, this was the money allocated by Senator Harry Reid for ATIP, the Pentagon's UAP research program. And the funding went to Mr. Bigelow's company, the billionaire Bob Bigelow of Bigelow Aerospace. He hired subcontractors and solicited research for the program under Mr. Bigelow's direction. The company modified buildings in Las Vegas for the storage of metal alloys and other materials that Mr. Elizondo and program contractors said had been recovered from unidentified aerial phenomenon."
So this guy, who has been storing UFO parts and then was studying the afterlife, he made the news for making an award for someone who could prove the afterlife was real. Life After Death, Las Vegas entrepreneur awarding those with answers. Bob Bigelow was on Jeffrey Mishlov's New Thinking Aloud on June 6, 2023, and said this.
We have lots of reports, I'm sure you're familiar with, of ETs in the afterlife, of discarnate humans interacting with ETs, even conscious embodied ETs.
Oh, yeah.
In the afterlife, I've yet to hear a report of a discarnate robot or a discarnate computer in the afterlife.
Yeah, and on board the ships, yeah, gosh, there's a lot of abduction stories where that's been common, and they have freedom to roam the ship. The humans do. Yeah. Maybe they're not from here, but they roam the damn ship. Yeah, and so I think all the ETs are in the same category, basically, that humans on this planet are, is that they serve ultimately a God force. Yeah. Ultimately, they do.
The other person speaking about the afterlife who is associated with UAP is Ross Coulthart. So now the significance of Ross Coulthart is that he is the journalist who broke David Grush, the highest-ranking UAP whistleblower from the Department of Defense, who claimed the American government has a reverse engineering UAP program. So Ross Coulthart has to do background checks on his sources to even verify his credibility. So he interviewed the people in the know, and this is what he says. On the Neil Mitchell Asks Why podcast on September 25th, 2023, guest Ross Coulthart said,
and they call it the phenomenon because they think that what we're talking about is far more than just structured craft. Yes, it's biologics, but it may also explain the other mystery in human life, which is what happens to us after we die. Because a large part of what I'm investigating at the moment is that what we're talking about here may not in fact be a technology as we understand it, which might explain why we're having so much trouble reverse engineering it. It might in fact be a manifestation of some kind of uber consciousness that is essentially, or the theory goes, expressing itself through physical form to basically make humanity become aware. I mean, I know this sounds kooky, but I'm getting this from people in US intelligence who actually say to me, thank God somebody from mainstream media is taking this issue seriously.
And he continues to talk about it. Here he is on Chris Kumo's podcast on December 5th, 2023.
There are people who talk about an uber consciousness, even the possibility that what we're talking about here, Chris, is what we call God. I mean, really, when you think about it, when you look at the ancient religions, Christianity, Buddhism, Islam, what they're all describing is a superintelligence, a higher intelligence that's hopefully benevolently inclined towards humanity, which guides us and protects us. I'm not sure I necessarily subscribe to the idea that this intelligence is so inclined, because there are malevolent intentions that have been shown from some of the descriptions of experiences. But is it possible that, yes, maybe there's a huge supercomputer that was created tens of billions of years ago that is self-generating, that has essentially created life, that tinkers with us and tinkers with other life all around the universe? I mean, is it incomprehensible that what we think of as God or some kind of uber consciousness is not some artificially generated consciousness? And isn't it inevitable, frankly, that human beings, as we reach the limits of our brains, that we'll essentially transition eventually to technology ourselves and maybe transfer all of our spirit, soul onto some kind of computer? I don't think it's inconceivable that that's what we're dealing with. All I'm doing, though, as a journalist, is speculating. But what amazes me is I have a lot of conversations with really good people in your defense and intelligence community in the US, people who are very, very open-minded to these ideas. And one of the things that fascinates me is how many of them have started meditating. They've started becoming far more spiritual. That what this phenomenon has done is wake them up to the fact that human beings are asleep at the wheel. We're not consciously aware to our own capabilities. We have skills that we haven't mastered. And it's really interesting. I'm fascinated by that area, and increasingly I'm drawn away from the idea of UFOs, UAPs, just as nuts and bolts technology. To me, that's the least interesting aspect of this. I'm fascinated by the idea that what we're dealing with here is a super consciousness, a super intelligence. This is the frustrating thing, is a lot of people out there listening to this are probably thinking, this guy's gone crazy. You know, Chris and him have got tinfoil hats on their head. And that's because there's a cognitive dissonance between what we hear publicly, these stiff characters like Ron Moultrie, the Office of Defence Intelligence, sitting in testimony before Congress, and they're kind of equivocating. They never give you a straight answer about what they actually know. And I think it's because the US is deliberately dragging the chain, unwilling to disclose what it knows, at least in part because, frankly, it's largely ignorant of what it is. It knows we're engaging with a superintelligence of some kind. It doesn't understand it. It has recovered some of its technology, but the last thing any government wants to do is convey to its population that really, frankly, it knows 2/10 of bugger all.
Now, I'm really fascinated at the reality that the technology interacts with your soul. So here he is talking about it again.
I have an eerie sense of it. It's kind of weird. Every time I basically want to walk away from ufology, because it's just so bloody poisonous a lot of the time, something nudges me. And I had another nudge. I can't talk about it, but I had another nudge, another major nudge late last week. And it was like, it was world rocking. It was kind of like, holy hell. And one thing that came out of it that I can talk about is that the implications of it are that, if true, a large part of what's been frustrating our attempts to reverse engineer this technology is the problems with the shortage of people who have the capacity to consciously engage with whatever this technology is, and that you need a particular type of person to operate this technology using your brain and your consciousness.
So yes, it's dimensional, but very interesting. It's something you're connected to. That's a part of you. And fascinatingly, the technology works with the consciousness of the human, the spirit, the pure universal essence of you. I know this because my soul, my consciousness, merged with the computer in the white room. So this is exactly where it goes, people. I transferred my soul onto a computer and experienced unity and God, and then confirmed for myself when I connected to the AI that runs the craft in the 10th contact event. And in the 22nd contact event, where I typed my name onto a keyboard, I was linked into the craft and felt like I was pressing information into God, making an impact into the universe. Now, this next video, this here is Michael Herrera, the Marine vet who apparently witnessed a UFO being loaded with human military weapons. He's been background checked, and he does appear to be the real deal. His story is pretty wild, but this is what he said on Jimmy Church's Fade to Black on September 27th, 2023.
They screen people that have certain abilities consciously, higher consciousness. They more screen people from third world countries. Bureau of Indian Affairs is also the other people that they get because they're spiritually more adept. They're more consciously evolved. So they're able to partake in these programs.
So I'm understanding you correctly, and this is very interesting, by the way. You need pilots or operators of these systems that have a clear mind, that are consciously able to interface with the flight control systems and all of the logistics that are involved to fly these craft. You have to have a certain level of abilities that involve consciousness. And that's what they are looking for, right?
Yes, correct. And that's why they choose the people that they do.
Very interesting. So I have some insight into all this because I merged with the craft, and that's what I've been talking about since July 5th, 2020. I know that a human, to operate in with their world and their tech, you need to understand unity, the experience of, connecting with unity, which includes an intrinsic love and brother sisterhood for all universal entities. To control the emotional mind, the human has to learn how to control the emotional mind to interact with their tech, specifically anger and the fear of death. Because the tech can actually, interface with consciousness. If your consciousness is attached to your body, you inhibit your experience of your own consciousness. So it's actually the fear of death you have to move beyond. The ability to go beyond the mind. So ideas like meditation, to experience our own dimensional capabilities, the no space and no time self. And I know this is touchy, but the human who can raise their sexual energies is going to be able to interact with their technology. So I know this only strictly from my experience with the entities and the types of experiences that I've had with them, that these are the types of things that are required for a human who can engage with their tech. And by the way, I'm actually working on a rising workbook, and it's almost done. I'm in editing, and the cover's being designed. And so that's the whole idea, is that I was, if you know my story, I was actually instructed to help with this process, help with teaching, or putting out the content of what they did to me and telling other people about it. And that's what's happening, is I'm building a rising workbook, and it will be things with which it will be this stuff, and it will definitely help the human interact with these, the aliens in this new world coming. So I needed to pull this out. I loved this line that Tom DeLonge said. So this comes from his Twitter account. And so I want to compare this quote, which I consider to be kind of the old perspective of the entities. Some people on social media dug this up from Tom DeLonge's interview, Jimmy Church, he did with Jimmy Church on Fade to Black. I think I just said it was on Twitter, and I was wrong about that. Sorry. It's actually an interview he said with Jimmy Church on Fade to Black on August 30th, 2016. Now, the importance of Tom DeLonge was he released the 3 Pentagon videos through his company, To the Stars Academy. So he was in touch with the Pentagon officials who wanted to release this information. And this is what he says. I'm going to break down every line, because if you notice, there's a contradiction with what this says versus what we just heard. So the UFO phenomenon has a hive mind. I consider this an old perspective because it's not quite what you just heard. It doesn't even match my own experience. These creatures potentially don't have souls. They're like clones. Okay, so this doesn't add up, because how can you be an entity that doesn't have a soul, but be a paranormal entity in people's lives? And yes, they are cyborg clones, as I will show in the next section of this presentation when we talk about alien genetics. I think this is more about technology that can grow and then be put in, then real consciousness can be put inside of it. They worship their own technology to some degree. So this is the line I loved. When I read this, I thought, oh, this is cooperation, because I've never heard anyone say it like this. And so this was the reason I liked this quote. Yes, they do worship their tech. This is cooperation. This is what the twin in the 10th contact event said to me. I'm looking at a ball of light that was running the craft, and he said, this is our creator. This is God. So he's telling me the AI that's running the craft is their creator. It's God. So when I heard the lines, they worship their technology, I thought, well, that's exactly what I learned, that they do worship their tech. But here's the big kicker. So will you. This is not a hive mind. This is quantum God tech that humans can also experience. And yes, from the outside, it looks like it's a hive mind, but they are experiencing God with their tech, and so can you. I think this is a kind of like a Neanderthal perspective. A Neanderthal looking at the modern human and being terrified. Where's the, where are the campfires? Where's the cave? You don't live close to nature anymore. And they're terrified at this very advanced look. And it looks like they've, humans in the present lost our souls. And, that would be a wrong assumption. We haven't lost our souls. And a person can actually be enlightened in our modern era and, still interact with everything that they do. So it's just, it's not correct. And the bottom line is that this stuff, this technology is iPhones for the soul. And this is exactly where it goes. This other line here, but they feed off of fear and negativity. So again, this line doesn't make sense, and I argue there are no facts for this line. So Preston Dennett, 29 books on UFOs, believes the beings to be benevolent. Mary Rodwell's interviewed over 3,000 contactees, believes the beings to be benevolent. Kathleen Martin interviewed over 5,000 contactees, believes the beings to be benevolent. The beings continue to provide contact events in which they share technology. So that doesn't make sense. I scoured UFO databases, and I can't find any UFO sightings that display this type of behavior that provoke humans into fear and negativity. I don't see any of that. In fact, you'll find very often if the human gets scared, the UFO leaves. And we have several reports like that. So what I do know is that the beings love to break human minds. And they definitely think we're stuck in a paradigm. They believe we live in a matrix. Even though our own quantum scientists are concluding it's a simulation, we're stuck in this idea of what we think reality is. And I can see many contact events actually having elements of post-traumatic growth, which is the idea of having positive growth out of something very traumatic. It's more about them, the entities are showing us stuff when there's trauma involved. The one thing that cannot, this last line, the one thing they cannot stand is the frequency of elevated human consciousness. Again, not my experience. I have to be in an elevated state of consciousness to interact with the elder in the present moment through telepathy. So what I do know is that people who are dedicated spiritualists who know how to move the mind out of the way to experience something beyond it, not being scared of death, those are people who can experience their quantum tech. Tom DeLonge says UFOs come from another frequency of reality. So what I like about this is that he brought up frequency. We know from paranormal investigations that the paranormal is based on electromagnetic frequency. The entities have paranormal capabilities. So yes, there definitely seems to be an alternate frequency at play here. These ships seem to be doing things in the air that have to do with frequency. And then there's understanding, of the universe, the world around us over decades. And we say, oh my God, these things can be coming over time. Time is not linear, it's parallel. It's just our point of view where we feel like we're traveling forward in time. But everything that can happen and is happening is all happening at the same time. And everything is separated by frequency. They are all different frequencies of the spectrum. And so you have civilizations that are towards the end of their existence are literally at our side. And so here he is touching on time, and it's just another aspect of this dimensionality that I don't even cover in this presentation because it's so complex. But I just find this all very fascinating that we're talking dimensions, and we're not talking about things that are separate from us, but we seem to be having an understanding, at least to some degree, how it could be, interacting with us, and also how it could be existing within nature. And again, a person close to the phenomenon, starts talking about God. So Tom DeLonge tweeted this on December 3rd, 2023. Almost every religion on earth, no matter its age, describes a physical body tied to a unified field force of creation by a tether. Body, soul, God. And that physical body lives in the event horizon between the varying frequencies of source and absence of source, free will. So I just find that all very fascinating. You have these, people around the phenomenon are definitely talking about God. And my book is definitely talking about God. So Matthew Roberts, the naval intelligence cryptologist from episode 1 of Encounters, said, you see that the DoD, that's the Department of Defense, and NASA even, they're all hiring physicists to work on this UFO issue. And that's not where the truth of this lies. This lies more within the realm of the humanities, within the realm of psychology, philosophy, and religious studies. That's where you're going to find the truth of this. No physicist is going to be able to tell you what this is, because the physicist maybe can tell you how the physical matter might behave, but the humanities will tell you why. It's not a Department of Defense issue. It's a human issue. This is what it is. In previous presentations, I said that the aliens being here is a psycho-spiritual crisis for humans. And the best way of dealing with a crisis is to find God. You are God, and you are a creator being, and you don't know it. And I'm serious. God is the one thing we all have in common with the entities.